there's a whole mental side of bulking where, at least for me, and I'm sure that a lot of people are like this too, you get a little bit insecure when you start adding a bunch of body fat to your frame, especially once it starts getting on your face, because like if it's on your hips or on your chest or wherever, you can hide it by wearing like baggy clothes. Bulking and cutting can be such a daunting and confusing thing when you first start. I remember when I first started my first bulk, it was like junior year of high school, and I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And I ended up just gaining like 30 pounds of fat and a ton of stretch marks. In fact, I have a stretch marks that you can probably see on me right now. It's these guys, these OG ones, just because I was intaking way more calories than I needed to in order to gain weight. For those of you who aren't super familiar with this space, basically a bulk is where you eat in like a slight surplus of around like 1 to 300 or so calories. At least that's like kind of what you should be doing above your maintenance calories. And your maintenance calories are just like the calories that you burn throughout the day on average. So how much you're expending and how much you do from NEAT, which is just like twitching and stuff. And that's how you are typically supposed to bulk. And as you gain weight, you'll slowly increase calories too in order to maintain that like 1 to 300 surplus. So that, and the end goal here is to be gaining muscle, some lean tissue, some lean muscle mass, and minimizing fat gain. Because how the body works is it attributes all or most of the energy that you're consuming, so calories, because that's a form of energy, into surviving, because the human organism is just all about surviving so that we can reproduce and continue on the species. So it doesn't care too much about looking super good. Doesn't care too much about that. And therefore, it needs a surplus of energy, aka calories, in order to fuel it and have it be like really gung-ho about gaining muscle mass. So you need to bulk, but it can be challenging, especially in this world where there's food everywhere at your disposal. There's a ton of processed foods that you need to look out for. A lot of the packaging labels are super misleading. Like, I remember reading, I think it was like Ready Whip or something, and it was like 15 calories. And I was like, oh, geez, I can have as much Ready Whip as I possibly want, and I will never, ever gain weight. But you need to look at, it's like 52 servings per container. So that's like, like 1,000 calories or something like that, instead of the 15 that I predicted that it was. So it was totally misleading, because they could have just done like, just increase the serving sizes, and then it would just be more apparent at how many calories are in that. So it's definitely like a misleading thing. And a lot of big companies, they try to mislead you on purpose in order to try and, sell their products, not have you worry about. And that's the reason why, if you're living in America, America has like the most obese people out of the most, there's more people that are considered obese in America than any other country. But anyways, so bulking is just with the goal of slowly gaining muscle mass while minimizing how much fat you'll gain. And that's at least a lean bulk, which I think that everybody should strive for. Of course, my first bulk was a dirty bulk. Most of my bulks have been a dirty bulk. But nowadays, like the past couple of years, I've been really good about my bulks. I've been doing it nice and slow, nice and controlled, and not letting the mental impact really get to me. And what I mean by that is there's a whole mental side of bulking where, at least for me, and I'm sure that a lot of people are like this too, you get a little bit insecure when you start adding a bunch of body fat to your frame, especially once it starts getting on your face, because like if it's on your hips or on your chest or wherever, you can hide it by wearing like baggy clothes. But your face, even if you have a beard like I do, eventually it's going to catch up to you and you're just going to look chunky. And that whole thing can really get to somebody if they care about their appearance like I do. So there's that whole mental side that you kind of just have to accept. You have to accept that this isn't forever, and you have to have faith in yourself that you can do a cut properly. And if you don't have that faith, then you're probably more inclined to quit. So what are some strategies in order to have that faith and approach bulking from more of a healthy mindset? Well, I found that going into it with the intention of this is temporary, like I just mentioned, is a great way to start. And then just going slow with it and trusting the process. I think that's probably the biggest one is trusting the process, because you'll have days where you wake up and you jump on the scale. It's like, 3 pounds up from the day before, and you're freaking out. You're like, it's going too fast. I need to cut my calories. I need to slow down. But there's fluctuations in the scale all the time, and you can't predict for that. And that's why when you weigh yourself and you're tracking how much body weight you're gaining, you should always weigh yourself first thing in the morning without clothes on, because that's going to be the most accurate weigh-in. And if you can't do that for whatever reason, then just make sure that each time of day that you weigh in is the same time of day across the board. So say you weigh yourself like 3 hours after waking up, make sure that it's always at that 3 hour mark every single day, because that's going to be the most predictive, because you want the same stats every day. And of course there's going to be fluctuations, but that's why you would ideally weigh yourself same time day in, day out, and then you take the average of 7 days. And nowadays there's smart scales that can take all that data for you, so you can see on an app or something. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So I think trusting the process and going into it with this is temporary is a really good one. And then also just being patient and trying to be consistent. That's a big one too. Try not to do anything crazy. And if you do, realize that it's not the end of the world. Say you binge eat at a buffet, or you go out drinking with some buddies or something and you go 1,000 calories over. You gotta keep in mind that the body doesn't just adapt overnight. It's a very long process for all these mechanisms to occur. So even if you go over for one day, you could just eat less the next day or the following day after that. And as long as that weekly caloric intake is modified, then you're good. Because a single pound of adipose tissue is 3,500 calories. So if you're going above 3,500 calories for the week, which is probably around where you may want to be, maybe a little bit less. I think what's the average? It's 2 pounds a month. So maybe you want half a pound a week. So you're going up 1,000 calories. Dang, I can't do it in my head. You get what I'm trying to say. So let's flip over to cutting, because cutting is another one where it's equally as crazy on your mindset and on your body, just in the polar opposite way. Because while bulking is you're trying to gain as much muscle mass as you possibly can while minimizing the fat gain, for cutting, you are trying to preserve as much muscle mass as you can while increasing the fat loss as much as you can. So it's kind of the opposite side of the coin. And for me, the real mental barrier with cutting is I know I'm not gaining very much muscle. In fact, I'm probably losing some. So all the working out in the gym doesn't feel like it's amounting to too much. But if you really botch your cuts, which I've done on a lot of cuts where I'm not going hard enough in the gym, so I end up losing all my progress, that's going to be the most self-defeating thing. If you're just going in this constant loop of you're bulking hard, but then you're failing your cut, you're still going to be at baseline zero. You need both sides of the coin in order to have perfect balance and the progression that you ultimately want moving forward. So when you're cutting, you want to reduce your calories by a lot. Actually, you can reduce it by as much as 1,000 calories to really lose a substantial amount of weight. But as long as you're eating enough protein, and you want around 1 gram per pound of body weight. So for me, I weigh 220, 225, something like that. I'm intaking at least that much in terms of protein. And I like to use protein powder, especially when I'm bulking. I'll use I'll just drink a ton of protein powder and that'll get me there. So, with cutting, it's a little bit more flexible in terms of you don't have like a strict, maybe flexible isn't the right word. You can really reduce the calories very far, but as long as your protein is up there, then you're going to be good. And as long as you're training hard, and what do I mean by training hard? Well, for most of the time, you want to be actually training the exact same way as you did on your bulk. Same intensity, same volume, same routine, same everything, unless you just really want to mix it up or if like something's hurting your joints or whatever. For me, I'm going to be keeping my workouts pretty much the exact same. Of course, they're going to be harder because I'm not going to have as much energy to fuel my workouts, but that's just a trade-off that happens. That's just how it goes. So with cutting, the mental barrier is that I know that I'm not gaining muscle and therefore I don't want to go as hard. Which, for somebody that loves the gym so much, you would think that I would want to go hard no matter what. But that mental thing just really messes me up. At least it has in the past. I'm going to try everything I can for when I bulk, which is probably going to be in like a month or two. Be in a month or two to really keep that intensity and all those training variables alive. And I think the best way to offset this like toxic mindset is to just remind yourself that it's only temporary and training should be a fun thing anyway. You should just train for the sake of training alone. It shouldn't just be for an extrinsic reward. Because after all, intrinsic motivation is much, much more long lasting than extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic is a fleeting thing and is really superficial if you think about it. If you're just, studying to get a good grade, then you're not going to learn as much as if you were studying just to learn the material because you love it. So, this whole thing should be mostly for an intrinsic goal. But I know that like lifting weights and doing like the whole bulking and cutting deal usually is for an extrinsic factor, like just looking better. But try and incorporate some intrinsic values to it. Maybe try and identify what it is for you that really gets you excited to be at the gym, what really gets you up in the morning, you know what I mean? So anyway, that's kind of how I approach bulking and cutting. We could dive into things like, dirty bulking. Dirty bulking is like 500 calorie surplus or more, I like to quantify it as. And there's really no benefit to it because after you get that little minor surplus above your maintenance calories, then your body is already going to be maximizing muscle growth. So anything above that tiny surplus is just going to go straight to adipose tissue gain, so fat gain, which is what we're trying to minimize. So, while dirty bulking can have its perks, for instance, you have that insurance. You know that you are gaining muscle. If you're gaining that much fat, like it's bound to happen as long as you're training hard. I think that's like the only perk beyond maybe you love to eat all that food. And often dirty bulking is associated with, fatty foods that are greasy, foods that aren't good for you, because it's easier to hit your calorie goals with unhealthy foods. But it doesn't have to be exclusively healthy foods as long as you're hitting like above the caloric thing of like 500 surplus. Then I would still consider that a dirty bulk, even if you're just eating a ton of salads and you're still getting them. You have to eat a lot more. But, that kind of, yeah, dude, we could talk about how gaining, I just totally lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. But yeah, I mean, that would be what a dirty bulk is. And, yeah, I'll tell you how to find your maintenance calories because that's a big one. I mean, that's honestly step one. I should have led with this. But for a really rough outcome, just take your body weight in pounds and multiply it by 14 and you'll get roughly how many calories you're supposed to eat or consume. Remember, liquid calories count. Any form of caloric intake counts. But by multiplying your body weight in pounds by 14, that's gonna kind of give you like a rough estimate. And of course, like this is like a generic equation. It's not really giving you everything that you're gonna need, but it's a starting place. It's a good place to start with. If you didn't do something like that, then how would you really know where to start with besides just guessing? And it's better than guessing for sure. So what I would do is use whatever number you get. For me, it's around 3,000 or so. And then add in that 300 calories and start tracking everything to the best of your ability. Personally, I'm not super anal about it. I'm not tracking every little thing. I've done that, been there, done that. I've used apps like MyFitnessPal and more, where I scan something and track everything. But I found that it just took up too much of my time. And that kind of added to a negative mental mindset too, because I would be limiting myself on things that I may want to enjoy. Like I would go out with friends and just have like a protein shake and banana. Screw that. You still want to be living. You know, this whole fitness thing shouldn't be getting in the way of life. So pretty much I just kind of ballpark it. I did the whole like calorie counting super accurately for so long that I kind of know like how many calories are in each food. For instance, like the average size banana is about 80 to 100 calories. An egg is like 60 calories. Like a glass of milk, like 16 ounces, like 300 calories. The list goes on. I know all of them because I did it for so long. So now I just kind of like roughly ballpark it as I'm eating throughout the day. And that seems to work very, very well for me. There may come a time, for example, when I do my cutting phase, where I'm going to make sure that I actually count everything. But as far as bulking is concerned, and as far as, you know, my goals are concerned, I think that just loosely counting it works. But if I didn't have that background of counting everything for years, then it probably wouldn't be working as well. So I'd recommend kind of trying out both. Probably start with the calorie counting. See if you like it. If you don't, try ballparking it. See if you like that better. Well, yeah, that's kind of about it. I just kind of wanted to touch on bulking and cutting, the side effects of doing so, kind of how to. Oh, well, after you find your maintenance, weigh yourself for a week and then take the average of that weight and see how much you went up. You probably want to be going up like half a pound to a pound in a week. And so that's kind of like the progression that I would use. I know it can take a lot of work if you don't have a smart scale, but you know, nobody said this thing was going to be easy. So take the average of the week, and across the weeks, you want to be going up by around half a pound or a pound in perpetuity. And then you adjust your calories based off of how much you're gaining. If you're gaining too much, lower the calories. If you're getting too little, up the calories. Go up like 100 or something. And eventually you'll find that sweet spot. And it's going to be a constant thing, because eventually you're going to gain enough weight, enough muscle where it's using enough energy to where you need to up your calories. So it's kind of a constant battle. For me, I have been I've been stuck at like the same body weight of like 220, 222 or 225, something around that range for a couple weeks now. So I'm having to adjust. I'm kind of in the midst of finding a new adjustment, but I'm still seeing some solid gains. So I'm pretty happy with how things are going. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a good one. Bye.